Sheldon Anderson. I'm with the Birch Gold Group, sitting
yeah.
down with legendary investor. They always call you legendary investor.
I don't know why it's absurd.
I think
absurd.
It's nice, though, I suppose.
I'm a simple person.
Well, I mean, you're a simple person, but you've correctly called some crisis. And this crisis, you've recently said, that will be the worst of our lifetime.
What I said was,
next
time we have a financial problem, and in America we've had financial problems every 4 to 8 years since the beginning of the Republic. We don't have to have them, but we always have, and I suspect we will continue to have them. Whether it's 4 to 8 years or 4 to 15 years, I don't know, but I know we're going to have another one. And what I said was the next one, when it comes, is going to be the worst in my lifetime. 2008 was bad because there was a lot of debt. Well, the debt is much, much, much higher now, Sheldon, than it was in 2008 everywhere in the world. People talk about austerity, but nobody has reduced their debt. Everybody's increased their debt. The Federal Reserve in the U.S. has more than quintupled its balance sheet alone in 9 years. I mean, these are staggering things that have been happening. And so the next time we have a problem, it's going to be the worst in our lifetime.
Isn't it sort of fueled by the fact that they've had interest rates pegged around zero for like 100 months?
Yes, interest rates have never been this low in recorded history. In many countries, interest rates are actually negative still. Were more negative before, but they're still negative in most countries, in many countries. It's all absurd what's been happening. If 20 years ago we had said interest rates are going to go to zero and they're going to go to negative, people would have said that's incomprehensible. It cannot happen. And if I explained it we've done by the central banks, they would really say it's incomprehensible, because in those days, the old days, people thought the central banks knew what they were doing, and they were certainly sounder than they are now. By the way, I should tell you, Mrs. Yellen, who's the head of the central bank in America, says there will not be any more problems.
In our lifetime?
In our lifetime.
That's right.
I'm giving both sides.
Well, right. I think there's a massive disconnect there. Somebody is right, and it looks like we go through these cycles, and it seems like this one's going to be worse than ever before. And it seems like the solution to the '08 crisis essentially created the next crisis. And are we months away from that manifestation? Years away?
It will probably start by the end of this year, and certainly be obvious by 2018, 2019. When these things start, they start small. In 2007, Iceland went bankrupt. Most people didn't know what Iceland was, that was a real country, much less that it could go bankrupt. Then Ireland went bankrupt. Then Bear Stearns went bankrupt. And then Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And after a year or two, everybody said, oh my gosh, there's a problem. Something's going on here. Well, that's the way this one will start. It may start this fall. I have no idea. But certainly by a year or two from now, we will all know, hey, there's something wrong.
Do you think that a harbinger for this are some of these state defaults, like state of Illinois and Puerto Rico? I mean, they don't live in a void, so something's definitely wrong.
I would certainly suspect that it will be, it could well be one of the U.S. states. I mean, most people have never heard of Puerto Rico. Most people have never heard of Illinois, just like most people have never heard of Iceland. You and I have heard of Illinois, because it's a big American state, but in the wilds of the world, they don't know what Illinois is. But it's probably going to be someplace like that. We do have several states that are essentially bankrupt, and I don't see how Illinois will ever pay its debts.
So this is a debt problem, and a lot of bondholders think that they've got, something solid there, but debt, if it goes away, that's a big risk. What does it look like to a typical investor with a buy and hold strategy when we see this next crisis?
Well, if he has a buy and hold crisis, if he's watching, he's going to see the value of his holdings go down a lot. But most of them will say to you, it doesn't matter because they always go back up. That has been true in the U.S. It certainly has been that eventually they go back up. It may take a long time, and some of your holdings may never go back up, but the averages have always gone back up. The averages are at all-time highs in the United States.
But isn't this all because of the bailouts? I mean, who is around to bail us out this time?
You said it very well. The problem of 2008, that their solution has led to the problems we're going to have next time around. All this money printing, all this gigantic debt is leading to the next problem, is why the next problem is going to be so bad. Who is to bail us out? The central banks will print. They will do whatever they can. They will print as much money as they can. They will spend as much money as they can, or get the government to spend as much money as they can. and they hope it works. But Sheldon, they may even get us out of the next one, but the one after that, they will not, no matter what they do, the time after that, there's no hope.
But this time around, I mean, their interest rates are at zero. They don't have any leniency. They're going to have to print the dollar. Is that not good for metals, gold, silver? What does that look like?
I own gold and silver. I haven't bought any gold and silver significantly since 2010, but I haven't sold any gold and silver. I'm hoping to buy more gold and silver in the next year or two.
Silver is, trading at multiples where it's 75 times cheaper than gold. Isn't it a good buy at that level?
Well, on a historic basis, silver certainly is cheaper at the moment than gold. I own some silver. I plan to buy silver and gold. See?
He's carrying silver. He throws it on the table.
I've got my silver, and I certainly will buy more gold and silver when the time comes.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. I think that this crisis is going to be worse than we've ever seen. I don't think anybody has a clue as to how bad it's going to be. There looks like there's nobody to bail us out this time.
They will do the same old things they did before. They will try to drive interest rates to even lower negative rates. But Sheldon, you have to remember, Mrs. Yellen says it's not going to happen. She says there's something wrong with you and with me for saying that.
Well, if I have the same thing wrong with me that you have, then I'm in good company.
Well, we both have the same thing wrong compared to Mrs. Yellen. It will be interesting to see if she's right. We'll certainly know in 30 or 40 years whether she was right, whether we never have another financial crisis or not.
Does it not pay right now then to be a little contrarian? If everybody thinks it's going to work out and the stock market's at all-time highs and bond market's at all-time highs?
I would not buy shares in the U.S. under any circumstances, not now. If you have to buy shares, Japan is down 50% from its all-time high. China's down 50% from its all-time high. Russia's hated. There are markets in the world that are not racing off to all-time highs if you have to buy shares. Now, I don't have to buy shares, so I'm not buying shares. If I find something, I certainly would. Don't get me wrong. But it's hard for me to find something that is compelling in July of 2017.
Final question is liquidity. So Bill Gross is on record where he says the financial system is a truckload of nitroglycerin going down a bumpy road. This guy is the top guy in bonds, ostensibly, in the United States, bond king. And he says when people start to sell, there's no buyers for these markets on the other side. And when they go back to the banks don't have it. That's the same thing we saw in 2008. What about the sort of ability to have possessions outside of the U.S. banking system, outside, i.e. physical metals or what have you?
Well, everybody should certainly have reserves in other countries and in other assets and in other places. There's no question about that. But he is right. Once they start selling, the central banks can try to buy, but Japan has already bought, the Japanese central bank has already bought nearly all the bonds in Japan. I guess they can buy even more, but eventually your currency is debased and ruined when that happens. So which is another reason I would expect the next crisis to be worse than in the past, because now we're going to have even more currency crises than we did before. The euro is not very credible anymore. The yen is under a cloud because of all its money printing that they've been doing. The Japanese central bank has not just bought all the bonds, they're buying stocks. They've bought a huge number of stocks, ETFs. They buy ETFs in Japan. So it's very good insight. I don't know what they're going to do.
It seems like a central bank bubble, and bubbles pop.
America's first two central banks disappeared for a variety of reasons. This one, I hope, will disappear too, because they're making such horrendous mistakes that we will get rid of this central bank. Now, a world without central banks has its own sets of problems, but these central banks are making the world much, much, much worse. So we would be better off with no central banks rather than these central banks, and then we can start over again.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It's really nice to meet you.
Yep.